because this Michigan team can score. It's not like there's some stagnant bunch that relies on their defense.
Welcome to the Street.
I think he can win us games. I think, thank you for your service, Cliff. But I go back and watch last year.
We've got a little baby version of Wendell White, Reggie Bush cooking with Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. Katron Allen runs the ball. Podcast. Nobody wants to tackle him. People bounce off.
Hey, Straight from the Crest listeners. Stat Guy Chris here to remind you that this episode is brought to you in part by our friends over at Protocol Beverage. Made by a few dudes in Erie, PA who wondered, why doesn't zero-carb beer exist? Protocol's new light shift gives you the ultimate beer experience with 0 carbs, a mere 80 calories, and they're shifting to what light beer should be. Savor the crisp, refreshing taste without compromising on flavor. Thanks, Protocol.
Welcome back to Season 4, Episode 13 of the Straight from the Crest podcast. I'm your host, Michael David Krestovich. Big game back on the show today as we're going to recap Penn State's win over SMU and preview today's game, the Fiesta Bowl, 7:30 p.m., Penn State versus Boise State. Justin, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thank you for having me, Mikey. I'm excited to talk Penn State football with you once again.
Before we dive into Boise State, we're going to talk a little bit about Penn State SMU. Of course, Penn State used a 28-0 first half to go on to defeat SMU 38-10. Dom DeLuca, 2 interceptions. Rojas had a pick six of his own. Very average day from Drew. The run game picked up in the second half. Justin, outside of Rojas and Dom DeLuca, who really stuck out to you from Penn State's side?
Yeah, I think when you look at that game, the flow of it kind of led itself to be run heavy. The defense gives us 14 points, spots us 14 points in the first quarter. Drew wasn't asked to do much. So what I would really highlight would be the pass rush in general. Now, the first pick was not due to the pass rush. I think that's just a bad throw from Jennings, although you do see Zane Durant in Kevin Jennings' face. But both of the other picks, those are the pick 6 to Rojas. He is flushed out of the pocket. He's rolling right. He's getting pressured. He makes an errant throw. And the pick that Dom DeLuca tipped up to himself, that was a play where we had pressure on him immediately, Dom included, and he tried to get it out to his outlet on the hot read to the slant, and Dom just makes a good play. So I would really give the credit to not one person. I'd really give it to just the front 4, front 7 in general. They made Kevin's life it was very difficult for him. You could see that the pressure of the moment was weighing on him, whether that's the crowd, whether that's, the presence of our front 7 being there. The way that they impacted the game, I think they all get a gold star from me. So I wouldn't give it to one player. I'd give it to the front 7 as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think we discussed it a lot on the show, the preview show, when me, you, and Garrett got together and broke down expect from SMU Jennings, and we talked about pressure and how it creates chaos, and that was the story where Penn State was able to get these big plays and make it a runaway game by the time it was even halftime. But Drew threw for 136 yards. Penn State went 6 for 13 on third down, held SMU to 3-14. They were great on third down offense and defensively, and just like you said, the pressure up front started it all. Of course, win number 100 for Coach Franklin. He's now one of 7 coaches with 100-plus wins, and among the current FBS coaches with 100 wins, he did it. He was the 3rd fastest, just behind Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney, obviously national championship winning coaches. We'll see about the rest of the year. But now, tonight, New Year's Eve, back in the Fiesta Bowl, a place where Penn State's very familiar, as is Boise. It's the no longer the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. That was out of the way. But you remember those crazy iconic games, of course, Boise State, Oklahoma, where Boise State had a crazy Statue of Liberty walk-off play to win that. 2 teams very, very familiar with this bowl. As we talk about Boise State, Justin, this is a team that just has 1 loss this season. It was back in September on the road to no other than Oregon. It was a 3-point loss. They have 1 ranked win, and it didn't come until the Mountain West Championship against UNLV. 10 of its 12 wins this year, it's a 12-1 ball club. 10 of its 12 wins this year are by 1 possession or more. So they're not, I mean, you can talk about who they're playing, but the teams they play, they take care of. And we'll get into this later, but the big reason is they have a pretty good running back, I guess I'm hearing. Haven't really heard much about him, but we'll go into that. But tell everyone what Boise State's about before we delve into the person. What comes to mind?
So what comes to mind when I think of Boise State, especially in relation to the Fiesta Bowl, is that this is a team that has built its reputation largely off the back of being giant killers, so to say. They come into these games, the Fiesta Bowl particularly, where they're typically underdogs, and they knock off a team that they're not supposed to. And it sends ripples throughout the college football world. And like you said, there are iconic plays from this specific bowl game with Boise State in regards to taking down blue bloods of college football. So I think that like a decent part of Boise State's reputation comes from games like this and their ability to punch above their weight class and play teams that on paper they shouldn't be able to play. When I look at this year, I see a team that has been dominant in the Mountain West. And unlike the bowl games that I just mentioned, they have been the better team than the teams that they're playing the majority of the year, right? They have the Heisman runner-up. So I know you made a sly comment about Ashton Jeanty. He is a phenomenal running back. I think, he is probably one of the, he's by voting the second best player in college football. I think that that's up for interpretation. But this is a team that has been able to have their way with the majority of their opponents due to the talent that they have on the field, whether it's the offensive line or the running back. And their defense does have a significant presence in the game due to the pressure they can bring on quarterbacks. And they can tend to flip game scripts in their advantage, where you can have a game where you have your running back touch the ball 30 times a game and your defense can force turnovers, sacks, etc., get the offense off the field in a timely manner and in a way that allows you to execute your game plan. And I think that that is the way that the Boise State Broncos have been living the majority of this year, is that games have been played on their terms and dictated by the way that they want to play the game. Coming into this game, it'll feel familiar to them because, again, it's a Fiesta Bowl. They're going into a game that they're not supposed to win. But when I look at Penn State, I think of plenty of fond memories that Penn State fans, albeit older than we are, have of the Fiesta Bowl. So 2 of our national championships, 82 and 86, came off the back of the Fiesta Bowl, right? And 86 in particular, we beat a team that we weren't supposed to beat in the Miami Hurricanes. So I think that this bowl game holds pretty special meaning to both squads. And I'm really excited to watch it. But to bring it back to the question of what's the Boise State team all about, they're a team that has been very dominant in the Mountain West, and I think that that is due to the talent that they have on the offensive side. And while their defense, they're not slouches on defense, I think the majority of the success we can attribute to the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. Something has to give here. Penn State's 7-0 all time in the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State's 3-0. Something's got to give, of course, with a trip to the college football semifinals on the line. But yeah, let's get into the personnel here. We start off the show. I start off the show, no disrespect. Ashton Jeanty, even Franklin today said he's going to go down as one of the best running backs of all time, but he's much more than a runner. He was second in receiving yards as a running back last year on their team. And they've got a serviceable quarterback. Maddox Madison's completed 62% of his passes this year. He's tossed 22 touchdowns and thrown just 3 interceptions. Jeanty, we could rattle off the stats. He ran for 2,500 yards, nearly 30 touchdowns almost. Their number one receiver, Justin, is Cameron Camper. He's a Indiana transfer. Penn State played him last year the year prior. And he's a leader in yards. Matt Lauder leads the team with 6 touchdown receptions. He's their tight end. They love to use him on drag routes. And Latrell Caples has 5 touchdowns there. On the defensive side of the ball, they have one of the best edge rushers in college football in Jaden Virgin Morgan. He has 10 sacks, and then Ahmad Hassanin is their guy who has 8.5 sacks. So they have 2 very capable edge rushers, but their best player on defense may be their safety, Ty Benefield. He leads the team in tackles, which is bizarre for a safety to do that. and he's the only player on this Boise State Bronco team with more than one interception. Their offense is a little different. They went into this year with two quarterbacks, Malachi Nelson, who transferred over from USC, and Maddox Madsen. Madsen finished out the year as a quarterback, but he had to beat out Malachi Nelson spring ball to get this position where he's at now. They bring back 4 offensive linemen who started 7+ games. All 4 starters return on the defensive line, and they get back 6 of their top 7 tacklers. Head coach is Spencer Danielson. He's the former DC. They fired their head coach last year, brought in Danielson as an interim. He finished out the year. Their offensive coordinator, you guys may remember the name Dirk Cutter, who was once the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, spent a lot of time in the NFL. D coordinator is, I really like their defensive coordinator, Eric Shenander. He is a Dan Campbell type. I think he will be one of the top head coach candidates in the next few seasons. He spent time at Nebraska as a D-line coach, and also close to home here, their special teams coordinator, Stacey Collins, was on the Penn State staff last year. So that's kind of who they are as a makeup. We can talk about their offense as much as we want. We can talk about how they probably have the Heisman runner-up, on their team. They have and Madsen's only a sophomore quarterback. They have weapons around him, and they've got some guys on their defense. I think this is a better overall team than SMU, but it's not enough to scare me. One thing, Dustin, that I'll be looking out for this game is Boise State blitzes a lot. They blitz at a clip top 5% in all of college football. But when they blitz and they don't get home, they give up. They're 111th in the country in explosive plays allowed when they blitz. So they are dead last. And this is a game that I think the Penn State offense can really come alive. After we saw Penn State's offense really just coast against SMU, and we had the turnover luck, which obviously when you have 2 defensive touchdowns are going in your favor. What does the offense have to do in your mind this game to get some security, not looking ahead, but just to a better performance? What would you like to see here?
Yeah, so I think one thing that you mentioned that is sort of indicting on their defense is that their safety is their leading tackler, right? So I can remember a Penn State team whose safety was their leading tackler, and that was Marcus Allen.
Chico.
Yeah. And, Marcus, we love Marcus Allen. He has
We're a Marcus Allen pro podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the blocked field goal, he has multiple iconic plays. The safety against Pitt in the north end zone at Beaver Stadium. Like, he has multiple iconic plays. But nobody would look back at that defense and say that defense was an elite Penn State defense, right? So the fact that Marcus Allen was making all of those tackles and all of those plays was more of an indictment on our front 7 than it was a compliment to Marcus Allen, no matter how much we like Marcus Allen. So when you look at Boise State, and the stats also back this up, Boise State is, I think, the worst tackling program in America. And I don't think that's not an opinion. That is an actual fact. Like, they are 134 out of 134 in missed tackle percentage. So when you have a lot of missed tackles, the safeties have to cover that slack. We have 2 very good running backs who, albeit aren't super shifty, but are very, very capable and very solid running backs. So when you look at Katron Allen, he is more of the run you over type. You look at Nick Singleton, he's the run by you type. If you're not sound up front against the Penn State offense, you're going to have a long day, right? And so we have seen our offense, and specifically our run game, be able to take it to a lot of quality opponents. Oregon, we ran for 290. Last game against SMU, we ran for like 180, almost 200. And if you take out the sacks, it was over 200. And I would expect that to be a key to Penn State's game. And it would also be a key to keeping the Boise State team the Boise State offense off the field, right? So we talk about the Boise State running game, right? If we control the time of possession in this game with our run game, which I think we are very capable of doing, we eliminate a lot of the stress of facing Ashton Jeanty down in, down out, right? If we control and we dictate the pace of the game and we dictate the possessions of the game, I think that really plays in our favor. So when I'm looking at our offense versus our defense, I'm looking at the advantages or the matchups we can take advantage of. And I really think that it is our offensive line and our running backs against their front seven, right? So their safety, who has had a good year and he's leading their team in tackles, that is not because I'm not trying to discredit the safety. But what I'm saying is if the safety is making an exorbitant amount of tackles, it is because the running backs and the ball carriers are making it through the front seven. And so I think if we can expose that, we can control the pace of the game and we can really dictate how this game is played.
I want to stay on the topic of missed tackles. This is from Stat Guy Chris here. Shout out Chris. Since week 10, Justin, Penn State's missed 85 tackles, second most in the FBS. Granted, they have played two more games than any other team since then with the college football playoff and Big Ten. Does the lack of tackling give any concern for a special talent like Ashton Jeanty?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does, especially when you look at Ashton Jeanty's numbers as a whole. I've complimented Boise State's offensive line, but I think more than half of Ashton Jeanty's yards are after contact, which would lead you to believe that, the Boise State offensive line is opening up some holes, but a lot of this is on Ashton Jeanty making guys miss, breaking tackles, etc. And so when you look at the teams that Penn State's played since week 10, I don't see a running back that is of the same caliber as Ashton Jeanty, but I do see offensive lines that are of the same caliber. And I think that a really big key in this game will be Zane Durant. I have been critical of Penn State's ability to stop the rush in previous episodes. And I do think that has been a weakness of the team dating back a couple of years. But when I look at those games, the offensive lines that we were playing against they were higher caliber offensive lines than the Boise State offensive line, right? So you think of the Michigan team that won the national championship. You think of Ohio State teams that have competed for national championships, although not won it since 2014. Those guys were multiple NFL players, still NFL players. I don't see Boise State's offensive line and think NFL players. And so I think that when you stack them up against our defensive line, I think things can get really muddy for Ashton Jeanty. And he may ad-lib and have a couple good carries where he bounces.
Yeah, 100%.
But I don't see him and that offensive line being able to move our front seven.
I think so too. I think that's a good point. And we talked about last week how Penn State was going to control SMU. To me, SMU is a better complete team because of their ability to think of it this way. Penn State's two losses this year, they were outmatched by speed on the outside. Boise State does not have that difference at the wide receiver position to expose our cornerbacks, and they don't have it. Penn State's other loss was Ohio State. Ohio State is great up front, and they have great linebackers. Boise State does not have a great linebacking core to really do that. We talked about last week, me, you, and Garrett all said Penn State wins. I mean, we both said double digit. Garrett said, I believe I think he said 10 too. But right now, I see the line at about 12.5. I think Penn State wins this game by 20 points. I have them Penn State 34, Boise State 14. I don't think Boise State has enough guys. It's the dude test. Like, Penn State just has more dudes. Like you said, Jay, like Jeanty's going to get his. I wouldn't be surprised if he eclipsed 100 yards, but he can do that. I think Penn State's offense comes alive this game. I think this is a game where Drew steps up because, man, he missed a lot of simple throws last game. And I think it was the cold. Like, I'm glad they're playing indoors because I think the cold affected Penn State just as much as it did SMU last week. And you could tell first possession of the game, Drew had a simple dump down. He tried to run and then literally dump it down and got hit. But I think this is an offensive explosion. Give me your prediction and what to expect from the offense here against this Boise State defense.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in the last game. Like, there was a lot of talk about how the weather would impact SMU, but our offense also, like, we get guys in space and we move them around and we execute on passing concepts. The cold and the wind, particularly, we had 30-mile-an-hour gusts. Like, that's going to impact even the strong. Like, Josh Allen is getting impacted by 30-mile-an-hour winds. Doesn't matter how strong your arm is. Now you're going into a controlled environment. And I think that we're going to see an offense more akin to what we saw against Oregon, where Drew is able to fit balls into places that he has to, and he's going to be able to make big-time throws. But to go back to a previous point, I really think that the key to this game is to make this game be played at our pace, right? We should be able to run all over this team, right? I understand that they have some solid edge players, but there is no reason that we should not be able to run all over them. If we have less than 200 yards, I would say that would be like an alarm bell ringing that, okay, something's going wrong here. Because I think about like the most previous Penn State versus G5 matchup was us versus Memphis in the Cotton Bowl, right? And the only thing that I can remember about that game, not the only thing, but the thing that sticks out to me in that game was watching Journey Brown and that Penn State offense, a Penn State offensive line particularly, dominate that Memphis G5 team, right? That is the team that we need to be in this game. We can dictate the pace of play. We can dictate how the game is played. And we should be able to control how many possessions the game goes. So now if you limit the amount of possessions, you limit the amount of carries that Ashton Jeanty can get, I just really, and not to sound arrogant, I don't see a way that Boise State wins. If we can't run the ball, I think that there's things that are more up for interpretation. But if we can execute our game plan, which is get our ball players the ball, which is Tyler Warren, Nick Singleton, and Katron Allen, I really don't see a way that Boise State wins the game.
Score prediction?
Score prediction. So last week I went 24-10 Penn State. I didn't account for the 2 pick sixes. Otherwise I would have been right. We're going to go with that take. Yeah, I can see it being like, I can see it being like 38-21. I think in Boise State fashion, I do think that they will be able to score some points, and they might score points early too. Like I don't predict them to come out vanilla. I think that first drive of Boise State, they are going to pull out as many stops as they possibly can. I don't think that you're going to get Ashton Jeanty up the middle, Ashton Jeanty to the left, to the right in that first drive. I think that it's going to look very exotic, very similar to the plays that they pulled out against Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl that they're famous for, right? But that style of game is not sustainable for an entire game, right? So I can see them scoring points early, but I don't see it lasting because there's not a never-ending list of plays that they can get to get chunk yardage out of. So I think eventually the talent gap will present itself, and I think it'll present itself through the Penn State run game and the Penn State ability to prevent the Boise State offense from executing in the way that they want to.
This is the game. This is the game that we've talked about since before Ohio State. I would say USC. When me, you, and Garrett were on here, we talked, when's Andy Koldenicki going to, quote, get in his bag? I think this is the game where Penn State's offense comes to life. Justin, you talked about the exotic looks from Boise State. I think this is the game where Koldenicki is be like, hey, man, listen, we're indoors. We're a game away from the semifinals. I think we're gonna see some exotic packages. I also read, I don't know, I think they might be just saying this, but Grunkmeyer has some packages for him, which would be neat to see. I mean, I feel bad. The poor kid, first pass attempt of his career, or one of his first pass attempts is a drop by Trey Wallace. It's picked off. He's going to be fine. It was neat to see him there. But, man, I think this is a game Penn State's offense just puts up numbers. And with that being said, I know last week
I have a question for you here.
Yeah.
If Penn State is in a position where we have to pull out all the stops, I think that's objectively bad. If we have to show the whole deck of cards against Boise State, I think that's a bad thing going into the semis. I'm not overlooking Boise State, but if we can't execute our game plan to the way that we want to execute our game plan and dictate the way that the game is played, like, by all means, if the game gets into deep waters, open it up, use everything that we got, make sure that we get on to the next round. And yeah, get Grunkmeyer the ball. Yeah, I mean, that's been part of our offense the whole year is having a running quarterback come in. And I don't know how elusive Grunkmeyer is. He hasn't really shown it in games, but I hope that we don't have to go to those exotic packages that you were talking about. I hope that we don't have to open up.
No, I don't think it's it's not a desperation thing. I just think this is like we saw in USC, they did a lot more than we saw them all season. I think this is now part of the arc of Koltnicki where he's like, okay, listen, I'm indoors again. I want to see this offense flourish. And I think that's why. Who do you have for first touchdown?
First touchdown, I think it'll be Katron. I was going back and forth on this in my head of whether it would be Nick or Katron. I think Nick will start the first series as he usually does. And he may very well end up getting the first touchdown. But I think once we get into that super low red, like 5 and in, like that's Katron Allen. That's kick the door down. That's the whole offensive line gets hyped and pulls down the mask while they all scream whatever they scream. But I'm going to go with Katron Allen.
I have a wild pick.
Let me hear it.
And I think Dom DeLuca.
Dom DeLuca.
I think he gets one. I think this is just the playoff for Mr. Dominic DeLuca. And if he doesn't, give me Tyler Warren. I'm going to go with the favorite here. But 7:30, Louis Riddick, who's not a big Penn State guy. He's got the play-by-play. State Farm Stadium, Glendale, Arizona, Boise State, Penn State. We both have Penn State winning. Justin, thank you very much, brother, for joining the show. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Michael. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys, and Happy New Year.